Hello and welcome to episode 7 of all the movies that I've watched in 2020. Today I will be unveiling movies 70 to 61. Let's go. And to start off, number 70 is a movie that hits close to home in 2020, and that is Contagion. A movie that recounts the events of a fictionalized pandemic and is a very realistic one at that. The tension is palpable in this movie, where the process of the events leading up to the so-called pandemic and the events after in the aftermath unfold in front of our eyes, and it's frightening to see. I mean, the reason this movie generated so much popularity 2020 was how would how would we relate in this kind of scenario. Unfortunately, we're not in anywhere near the same kind of pandemic as was portrayed in the film, but it's still disheartening to see how humanity crumbles in the face of turmoil that brought upon by the pandemic. And it's a very well portrayed movie, and director Steven Soderbergh does a very good job putting the events into action, and the characters in this movie also do a great job. But and overall, it is a very good movie. But it also, you have to take it with a grain of salt, as it's not an entirely realistic situation of a pandemic scenario, and that it's dramatized for watchability's sake. Next, we have Zero Dark 30, the true story of the mission to assassinate Osama bin Laden. And this movie is a interesting delve into what happened behind the scenes in the lead up to Osama bin Laden's death. And boy, Jessica Chastain hit it out of the park with this role in her first leading role. And well, I'll get to another one of her movies in a little bit, but this movie is where she really showed that she can belong, and she is one to be reckoned with in this movie. Her character, and as she takes charge of this, as part of the being in the CIA, of finding Bin Laden, and once they eventually find him and hiding out in Pakistan, they send in SEAL Team 6 to capture and kill him, which they end up doing. And there's so much tension because you're really rooting for them to find him. While on the way, they experience some obstacles. They get sabotaged by people who don't want them to find him, and as a result, they end up capturing him. And the movie does a very good job in showing what happened behind the scenes and what ended up happening in the time that led up to his death. Next, we have 22 Jump Street. Now, I already covered the first edition of the franchise a couple videos ago, and obviously the premise is very very straightforward. It's about two cops who go undercover, and this movie, the sequel to 21 Jump Street, continues on the success of the first one. And particularly what I like about this movie is that it's actually funnier in some points than the first one. As well, there are some very heart warming messages in the movie. But again, like with the one where they went back to high school, they go back to college in this movie. And so obviously they delve on some college themes and how they intend to proceed after college is done. And overall, I think it's a very well done movie, which continues on the success and even goes beyond the comedy in the first one. Next, we have Paul, a movie about two guys played by Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, the duo from the likes of Shaun of the Dead, and Hot Fuzz go on a road trip to New Mexico and end up befriending this alien named Paul, voiced by Seth Rogen. And it's such a weird concept, but it works for what it's going for. It doesn't take itself too seriously. And Seth Rogen is, while most of his jokes are profanity based, I feel like it they're still funny enough that it doesn't matter really if the jokes don't land. Furthermore, there is a goal at the end of this movie. There's a purpose in that they are trying to return him home, while also hijinks ensues with the FBI. One of the agents played by Jason Bateman, who's one of my favorite actors, is trying to chase him down, but it turns out they have a history together, and it's everything connects together, and that's what I like. Obviously, it does have some of the British humor that from Peg and Frost that they usually get carried on from their other two movies, but it's a little subdued, and I wish they included more of that. But obviously, as for an American audience, they may not land as well. But nonetheless, it's a very funny movie, and as crazy as the concept might be, it works for what it's trying to do, which is good to see. So from Paul to a Best Picture winner in Platoon. Now I'll be short and sweet with this movie in that it's a very it's a very hard movie to describe. I I liked how realistic it was, and how almost Shakespearean the characters were, and that they all had differing worldviews, and in particular how Tom Berenger as their colonel was this rugged guy who didn't show no mercy to the Vietnamese, compared to, and specifically the scene that stands out to me is where they massacre innocent village, and it's unimaginable the atrocities that they committed in the Vietnam War, and that's one example. And you went with the famous scene where Willem Dafoe's character ends up getting shot to death is really it's laughable now, but the power it had really resonated with me. And overall, it is a very powerful film, and very a lot of the action is very well done. Next, we have Borat subsequent movie film, and I'm not gonna get into the whole title. It's way too long. Now, I've never watched the first Borat, as it came out when I was fairly young, but I'm familiar with the character and how comedic he is, and obviously Sacha Baron Cohen plays him to a crisp, and it shows in this movie how it's unbelievable that he's able to stay in character with everything that he's exposed to in reality. Again, this is another movie. It's hard to describe the premises because it's so convoluted, but it works for what it's trying to do, like with Paul and all these other comedies, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, while also having a an endearing storyline with Borat and his daughter, who he's trying to sell to Mike Pence, the vice president at the time. I don't know how he was able to pull off some of the stunts he was, and how he was able to, particularly when he was exposed to all the rough and rumbling Proud Boys in Texas, and how he was able to just keep in character is all kudos to him. Also, Sacha Baron Cohen for that. But overall, it's a very funny movie, and one of my favorites of that came out this year.
Very nice. High five.
Next, we have Molly's Game, a movie directed by Aaron Sorkin. And Aaron Sorkin's directorial debut, actually. And after writing the screenplay for such acclaimed films as Social Network his directing style really adapts to the big screen, and I really like this film. Specifically, it is a true story about a gambling ring led by Molly Bloom, a former Olympics freestyle skier, who ends up getting into this business of illegal crime. And she has innocent beginnings, but eventually she becomes so powerful in this game that there's no going back. The thing is that you empathize with her because the fact that that it's wrong, but she's just trying to make out a living, and she's doing something that she is passionate about, but just so happens to be illegal. And it's tragic to see that unfold. And you can almost call her an anti-hero in that sense. But I think that Jessica Chastain again puts in a very good performance, and I also liked Michael Cera as who he was supposed to be playing, the version of Tobey Maguire. And to see all these celebrities in this gambling ring is very intimidating. It would be intimidating for her, and she proved her own, and she deserved to get to the place that she did, and unfortunately she would end up getting caught, but it wasn't without accomplishing a very powerful state in the gambling world. But overall, this movie is it moves very fast, and you eat it up, and how much happens in this movie. And at the end, you're just left mesmerized with how this was able to unfold and how people were able to make millions off this game. Next on my list is a TV movie, Bad Education. Now, this is a true story about a New York school that, well, spoiler, ended up embezzling millions of dollars, and it's just an insane story. And Hugh Jackman does an eloquently great job in showcasing his charisma and acting talent in this movie. And particularly what I like is how he's portrayed as this likable teacher, but secretly he has a dark side, and where he secretly has a lover outside of school, and not to mention he hasn't stopped the egregious spending of money by his cohorts, particularly his vice principal, played by Allison Janney, who's given thousands of dollars to her kids, and honestly it's based on a true story, and which ended up being found out and ultimately costing her job. And the school that had been rated so highly in the state of New York as top 5 school ended up affecting its reputation dramatically when this scandal came to light, and ended up having to pay back all the money that they had embezzled. And it's such a shocking story that this could have happened. You think that schools wouldn't be as corrupt as they are, but that's not the case. And schools aren't immune to the corruptness that comes within, and it's just what reality brings to us. So, but overall, and like with Molly's game, it moves very fast, so you don't have time to really miss anything with it. Next on my list, number 62 is JFK, another movie based on a true story, which I watched like with Parkland, I watched as part of a tribute to John F. Kennedy's assassination, and that's what it's based on obviously, aftermath of the assassination and the investigation that led into what actually happened on that fateful day in Dallas. And it's a very interesting story. It's like with Oliver Stone movies, is that you have to take it with a grain of salt because it's not entirely true. There are partially fictionalized components of the movie, which take away from the legitimacy in a way. But overall, I think that the acting is superb. Likes of Kevin Costner Kevin Bacon, Tommy Lee Jones, and even John Candy. All amazing jobs. The movie could have been a little bit shorter. It doesn't need to be 3 hours long, but there seems to like with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it tries to achieve a sort of satisfaction to a deceased figure, and you know, with all everything that was happening at the time in the United States, the, it was there was a tendency to forget that John Kennedy wasn't perfect, and that while he did do some great things for the country, his death ended up sparking a different world than we could have perceived with him as president. So it heroizes John F. Kennedy, but it doesn't earn that right to do that because it doesn't show it from both sides of the perspective and doesn't really give a clear answer as to who killed John F. Kennedy, while only really speculating conspiracy theories, which is disappointing to see, but it's still a very well crafted film. Last but not least for today, number 61 is Love Actually, a movie that my family and I watch every holiday season and we enjoy tremendously. Until this year, I think with everything that happened this year, this movie kind of didn't age well. At least I think there are some parts of this movie that I adore. The relationship between Colin Firth and his girlfriend is just so endearing, and there's the funny parts with the guy who goes to the United States to find a girlfriend. That that's funny. The other parts are just kind of stereotyped and and unrealistic, and particularly the Alan Rickman and Emma Thompson relationship has not aged well. I think that's one evident example, and it it's still a movie that hits close to my heart as it's a tradition that my family watch it every year. But it's slowly I'm slowly losing interest in it, and it's unfortunate to see. But it's as I grow up, I realize the that is not a perfect movie that I thought it was when I was younger. But it's still a very endearing movie that works for a period like the Christmas holidays. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's list, movies 70 to 61. Join me next time as I unveil the movies 60 to 51.